I think the final issue that I have with the CSE films and resources, and that really motivated me to start the hashtag No More CSE Films campaign, was that I feel like they're being used for corporate gain, and I feel like these films are being used in a really prescriptive, tick box, processy way. That there are two issues here. The first one is that the people selling them and making them, I think, have massive responsibility for this whole issue, because they should have put them through empirical testing and they should have got ethical review. Somebody should have been able to see what that content was and then advised on it, which never happened, which is why we have these resources. They are then being sold, some of them for up to £294 a pop, which means that local authorities are spending thousands of pounds on them. Charities are spending thousands of pounds on them. Police forces are as well. And where there's money, there's agenda. And where there's kudos, there's agenda. And where there's congratulations, there's agenda. And this field is wrapped up in that. There is this real issue with me talking about these CSE films being problematic. There are a number of professionals and organisations that will never support this campaign, that will never support the empirical testing of their resources. They won't withdraw them. They're not going to listen to the points that I'm making. They're not going to take it seriously that we might be harming children, because actually their reputation, their agendas, their kudos, the money that they're making from it is going to come first every single time. And so there is corporate gain here. There is reason why organisations choose not to allow people to put these through ethical review and empirical testing, because they know full well that they would get stopped at ethics, and if it didn't get stopped at ethics, the empirical evidence is not there to support the claims that they are making to local authorities and to these people that they're selling them to. They're selling them and saying they reduce sexual abuse, they'll prevent, they protect, they educate. We don't have any evidence that they do any of those things. And every time I challenge people and say, where is your evidence? I get these daft responses that say things like, well, we asked 12 kids and they liked it. That's not evidence. Oh, I went into a school and I asked kids and they said they wanted to see the DVD. That's not evidence. People saying things like, I've spoken to children and they said that the DVD really helped them. That's not evidence. I'm talking about stringently testing what the impact is with experts. What is the impact of watching those types of DVDs? Because we do have evidence that we can call on here against this corporate gain agenda. Because what about the evidence that we already have in psychology, that when you show children sexually violent materials, they actually become more and more desensitised to sexual violence. They have less empathy for victims of sexual violence. There is also evidence that came out last year that when children do interactive games that feature some form of violence against women and girls or sexual violence, they actually start to blame women and girls. They show less empathy towards victims of sexual violence, and they take sexual violence less seriously. So when they are then asked questions about it, they don't think it's that much of a serious issue anymore, because the gameplay or the imagery or the videos they've been shown eventually desensitises them to that. So even though we don't have any evidence right now about CSE resources and CSE films, we can be drawing on what's already there, and what's already there is pretty damning. We shouldn't really be using them. And it's about holding these organisations that are making and selling these DVDs to account and saying to them, what evidence do you have that this helps children? Why should I buy this? Why should my professionals use this? Why should my local authority be using your resource with real children? Why should we do this? What evidence have you got that this will help them? And what evidence have you got that this won't harm them? Because that's what we're concerned about. These are already children that have experienced harm. What can we do to make sure that the interventions that we put in and the help that we give them will help them and not harm them? So then the second issue around this sort of corporate gain thing and this corporate process thing is that as CSE has become more and more politicised, organisations and authorities are under a lot of pressure to respond to it correctly. And I go all over the country and I often hear we don't want to be the next Rotherham. And actually, I'm one of the people that feels that Rotherham has been hung out to dry, because I've been in areas where there are things happening, you know, equivalent to or more corrupt than Rotherham, and they haven't hit the papers yet, and they may never hit the papers. Every local authority thinks it's better than the next. Every area of the UK, every police force, every organisation I've ever worked with thinks that they're better, that they'll never be like that, that that'll never happen. And then I get called in and I do the work with them, and there is stuff happening like that everywhere. So as that type of culture has developed, this sort of like cover our arse culture, and it's resulted in strange processes. And one of them is that most local authorities and organisations that I have ever worked with have some sort of tick box process of showing these films to kids, where it'll be ticked off and say, you know, showed this film, or they've seen this drama as part of preventative or protective education. And the frontline professionals that are being forced to do that often don't think it's the best thing for the child. So instead, that professional might want to just talk to the child and talk to them about abuse, or talk to them about how they feel, or just build rapport with them and spend time with them. But instead they'll be told, well, what evidence have you got that you've done that? Where is it in writing? What if Ofsted was to come and check this? How do they know that you've done anything on abuse or on sexual exploitation? What proof have you got? You need to be using resources. You need to evidence which resource you've used. You need to write it on the case file. So then the professional has to go away, find some sort of DVD or resource and use that. And then it's only by writing that on there that they've proven that they've done that work. So actually, the resources in the films have become embedded in social work practice, which is really concerning considering they have no evidence base in the first place. And they're now actually being used as evidence that particular interventions have been put in place and that particular pieces of work have been done. And so begins the cycle of corporate gain, because you then have local authorities that feel like they have to use them, professionals that are being told that they have to use them, and then the organisations make some more, and then they sell them back to local authorities feel like they have to use them, and then they go round and round and round and round and round. And that is what's happening. So it's like created this sort of self-cultivating market that never existed before, that now does exist. And you now have people cashing in on it left, right and centre. I've seen grants go in, I've seen bids written for people to try and get money so they can make more resources. I've seen police forces make them, I've seen private companies make them, charities are making them, all sorts of different professionals are trying to make them, because actually they're thinking, quids in, this is. And that is the reality of this. It's either about making money off them or building organisational reputation and kudos from them. So it's sort of saying like, look, we've made this film, aren't we brilliant? Let's do a big launch and charge everybody to come to the launch. You know, we've got to be a lot more critical. We've got to be a lot more critical about why these films keep being used, even though there's no evidence, even though we don't know if they're harming children, they're still being used. And in any other field, I think they would have been stopped pending investigation or stopped pending empirical testing, but they've not been stopped. And we have to start really thinking about why that is, because I think there's more evidence here that this isn't about putting the child first, it's about putting those organisations first that are putting those, you know, DVDs out and those films out. And I think they have corporate responsibility, and it wouldn't surprise me if a lawsuit was to ever go through of the harm that was caused by showing those children those images. Not only would the authority or organisation that showed those DVDs would be in trouble, I think eventually it would climb up the ladder back to the ones that actually developed it and sold those materials to people, because I doubt they ever come with any type of legal disclaimer, because they come from NGOs and charities. So there is this corporate gain element of the CSE resources that we really need to be thinking about. So if you are in strategy, if you are in senior leadership of local authority or police force or organisation, you really need to be thinking about the impact of using these with children and what the impact is on your organisation.